Hi, everybody. Good to see you. It's like we're getting there with participants. Maybe we'll just kick things off in terms of introductions while people just kind of filter in. Let me just close this window so I can see what I'm doing. Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. It's really great to have you with us. As you probably know, and as you can probably see from the screen, the topic today is around the next generation of the internet and where we may be heading as an industry, some of the reasons why we're heading in that direction, and some of the changes that you might expect to see over the next few years. So you are here today. Oh, why is my mouse not working? There we go. You're here today with myself and Rob, the trusty CEO of Intranet Connections. My name's Alfie. I'm the Senior Communications Manager here. I know some of you on the call we've kind of worked with in the past. Some of you are new names, so it's really great to have you with us wherever you're coming from. Rob, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Alfie. Yeah, nice to have you all here today. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it. Some familiar names there, Marion, Shannon, and a few others that I see quickly. So thanks for joining us today. I'm happy to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really great to get the kind of attendance that we've seen over. We had a really great webinar last week where we saw quite a few customers join us, and we've kind of opened this one up to customers as well as non-customers. So it's really great to have a mix with us. So I think we'll get started by introducing, obviously we've introduced ourselves, but let's introduce Intranet Connections, the company that Rob and myself are kind of coming to you from. Rob, take it away.
Yeah, so some of you are a lot more familiar with us than others. So just briefly wanted to give you an introduction. Intranet Connections has been around since 1999. And later on, we're going to go through a little bit of the history of the internet and how it's evolved. So we've been early players in this market and have gone through a lot of the changes that have happened in terms of the evolution of internet. Across our customer base, we've worked with hundreds of customers, and we definitely have some certain industries that we have a lot of concentration in. So over 60% of our customer base is in finance or healthcare, generally community serving, credit unions, local banks, healthcare centers, those sorts of things. We have a lot of diverse customers as well. But we've offered some pre-built templates of intranet specifically based on best practice for those industries. When people work with us, what they often find is our customer service and our experience is really great. They really enjoy working with us. We're very personable and, pick up the phone, call us, talk to us. We all have a lot of different experts across technical support, customer success, communications, industry best practices on intranet, a lot of different things to offer. So we really enjoy talking to our customers and working with them. And that's a little bit about us.
Cool. Thanks, Rob. So let's just take a little look at the agenda for today's session. So firstly, we're going to start with a bit of definition. One of the terms that you may have heard kind of bandied around if you're involved in the internet industry is Intranet 3.0, which is kind of the next iteration, the next phase of the internet. So we're going to start by defining that and looking back a little bit about where intranets first kind of came from and where we've moved through, where we are now, and then maybe what's going to be coming up. We're going to speak about some modern challenges, so some of the drivers behind the changes that we're likely to see in the industry and why those might be. And then as a result of those challenges, what we may expect to see in terms of features, in terms of changes, in terms of the developments that are going to be made to the software moving forward. Now, obviously, disclaimer alert, nobody knows what the future holds. So these are kind of our best guesses based on our own experience and some of the research that we've conducted as well. And then finally, we'll finish with some Q&As as well. Now, for those of you who are kind of used to the Zoom webinar platform, there is an option, a Q&A option. So you can kind of post some questions in there, and that will give us a chance to kind of respond to them individually rather than getting lost in the chat. You can post in the chat as well. We are going to be monitoring the chat throughout the presentation. And one thing that we're really keen to do is, personally, I get bored of listening to my own voice. So we're really interested to get some input from you. We're going to be running a couple of polls throughout the presentation, but we're also going to be asking kind of questions, and we'd really love it if you could contribute by posting in the chat, sharing your own thoughts and ideas and experiences around some of the themes that we're going to be exploring as well. So Please don't be shy. It's really great to kind of get some input from those who are attending the presentation and the session, as well as Rob and myself who are going to be presenting. So without further ado, let's move forward. So we're going to start by defining Intranet 3.0, and Rob is going to be taking us through that. So Rob, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Alfie. So I think it's important to set the stage a little bit about the conversation, some of the things Alfie's going to run through. Some of you are quite familiar with Intranet. Maybe you've implemented a few intranets, have worked with companies that have had different flavors of Intranet, either in-house built or off the shelf or SharePoint intranets and those kinds of things. So you have different levels of experience with them. But these started, really the term Intranet was coined in 1995. Real commercial internet started to come out around the .com time. So we've got just over 2 decades of internet market experience here. The first, I'd say 5 to 10 years, a lot of internet was focused on just a central place to gather resources. So gather links to important documents, resources, fairly static intranets. A lot of them were built on just basic HTML tools, a lot of reliance on technology stakeholders in the organization to manage that content, maybe even have a dedicated internet manager. And so it became quite a lot of bottlenecks and not very dynamic. With the social era, Facebook really started to dominate around 2008. There started to get a lot of pressures in the market to bring consumer-like experiences around social collaboration to support productivity and engagement. And that really started to change the internet. You see now a lot of pre-built applications to support different types of jobs, user-generated content, and delegated ownership. So less technical knowledge needed to work in internet, and a lot more value you're getting from the platform. That brings us now kind of toward the modern era, where again, consumer trends typically start to influence us. So, and things that are happening. COVID just a couple of years ago shaked up the world of work and how we work. A lot of us went to remote, maybe hadn't worked remote before. So starting to think about productivity. How do we continue to connect people with each other, help them do their job in a digital experience, battling with things like VPN access and, disjointed applications with different experiences, and more, accessibility. So there's a lot of different trends out there, like machine learning. Maybe some people have experimented with things like chatbots. I was working with a customer just a few months ago that was putting a chatbot on the internet as an example, which may be kind of, you're probably quite familiar with those on different websites and things like that. So, even things like virtual reality, voice interfaces, a lot of these different things that generally come out in the consumer world start to influence internet and trying to get to a more tailored experience, a little bit more personal, insightful, driven, that helps to kind of conduct you in it, especially around the end user. So that's kind of where we are today. And Alfie's going to run through a lot of different themes and some challenges related to that.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Great summary. So let's move on and start talking about some of the modern challenges that some of you may be facing within your organizations. So when we're talking about technology, software, generally, and this is a rule of thumb, but I think it kind of holds pretty true, they should always be developed in response to a specific problem or a need. Often, you hear the term solutions when talking about software and technology. And there's a reason for that, right? Because there has to be a problem in order for there to be a solution. Now, the various features of what we call an intranet today were developed to solve specific business challenges. So publishing news and updates to keep employees informed, providing access to documents so processes can be consistently followed, sharing employee contact details so you're able to easily communicate with each other. Now, these are specific challenges, but there are higher level drivers that kind of sit behind them and drive them forward. So according to Software Path's 2020 Enterprise Software Report, there are 3 kind of leading reasons why companies look to introduce new technology. They are to increase efficiency, unsurprisingly, to add greater functionality to the software that they have and the kind of, the functionality of what the organization can perform, or to support the growth of the organization. Now, these drivers, they're not going away, right? Organizations will always seek to become more efficient. They'll always want to be able to do new things and provide new and better services. And they'll always seek to grow generally, right? We live in a capitalist world, and growth is the kind of priority for for business. Now, these drivers are unlikely to change, but the world of work in which they kind of sit has evolved. And so too have the specific challenges experienced by these organizations. And therefore, the way that technology can help resolve them has also changed. Now, as with any new frontier, there was always a catch-up period between the emergence of a new problem and the solution for it. So we're going to go a little bit off the beaten track here. I live in a place called Squamish, Marion's favorite place in Canada, I'm reliably informed. Now, it's one of the mountain biking capitals of the world. It's great. You can go, ride some of the best trails in the world 5 minutes from your door. So I'm going to talk about mountain bikes to kind of illustrate this point. Bear with me. Now, this is what mountain bikes used to look like in the 1980s. It's a new sport. People had only just started to ride bikes off-road. It was mainly gravel and dirt paths that they were riding on. But as people started to push boundaries and look for more extreme things to ride, the bikes, the bikes that they were riding, the technology had to catch up. So this is what they looked like. They were, they were riding some quite extreme things. So as a result, there were lots of frustrations with the technology, lots of injuries, lots of broken bones and broken bikes. Now, slowly but surely, improvements in the technology were made, spurred by the commercial interest in the sport. So suspension was added, bigger wheels and chunkier tires, lighter and stronger frames. And that even triggered developments in adjacent technologies as well. So safety equipment improved, helmets got better, the emergence of back braces and elbow and knee pads, right? And the way that the trails themselves that you ride on were built. So as a result of all of that, riding a mountain bike went from looking like this to looking like this. And this is from an event that I actually attended a couple of weeks ago called Crankworx in Whistler, where people are flying all over with their bikes. They're doing backflips, they're kind of spinning them around. It's crazy. You'd never have imagined it back in the 80s, right? Now, because of the additional needs or desires of the kind of users, bike riders, that spurred technology on. And as a result, new things are being released every day, every year, improved features as suppliers try to keep up with demand. The same thing applies to software. So let's kind of bring it back to software, because I could talk about bikes all day. Now, over the past 10 or 12 years, as software has improved and providers have kind of carved out their own niches, we've seen a move away from single vendors acting as like a jack of all trades to highly specialized, best-in-breed business tools designed for a specific purpose. And as a result, there's been an overall increase in the number of applications and pieces of software used by businesses. Now, this is a slightly older stat from Okta, but I think it illustrates the point really well, even pre-COVID. The number of software apps deployed by large firms across all industries worldwide has increased by 68% over the past 4 years. So that's from 2014 to 2018, reaching an average of 128 apps per company by the end of 2018. And I suspect that's probably increased even more so to this day. Now, the software market, as a result, is more crowded than ever. Obviously, there are a few kind of behemoths like Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Amazon, but for each discipline, there's now a list as long as my arm of alternative specific suppliers. And the impact of this on intranet solutions is something that we'll talk about a little bit more later on. Now, business needs have always evolved, but the last few years, as Rob suggested earlier, has really seen a paradigm shift. Now, I'm getting bored of attending webinars and presentations where there's a whole section dedicated to COVID, but unfortunately, it's unavoidable, guys, right? It's been a huge transformative thing across the globe. We all know, right? We've all experienced the rapid adoption of new technology in response to the pandemic. Tools like Microsoft Teams and Zoom were used before, but nowhere near as much, right? And a lot of companies kind of scrambled in the early days of the pandemic to implement these tools in response to their offices being closed to make sure they could keep operating. Delivery services and e-commerce tools are other great examples of changes in technology that have been adopted because of this. And my personal favorite, the QR code, right? That was developed years ago. Nobody cared. It kind of stopped being used. And then all of a sudden, when we need to kind of, scan our menus, they make a comeback. So it's quite interesting how needs kind of maybe act as waves instead of just a kind of upward trajectory. Anyway, all of these developments were responses to evolving needs of organizations and society as a whole. And that resulted in lots of new pieces of technology being developed, but also older pieces of technology having to adapt and keep up. Now, new technology has enabled us to work differently, and hybrid models of home and office-based work are here to stay now. According to Accenture in their Future of Work report this year, 80% of employees prefer a hybrid model, and 63% of high growth companies, not sure what high growth means, have adopted a productive anywhere model on a permanent basis. Companies that don't kind of apply this flexible approach put themselves at a competitive risk, as employees, realistically, expectations have changed. And if your organization doesn't kind of fulfill those expectations, your employees are going to look elsewhere for an organization that does, to find that work-life balance and flexibility. Now, the term digital workplace has become more popular because realistically, it's an accurate reflection of what a lot of people experience on a day-to-day basis. For a lot of us these days, the primary interactions we have with our organization and the individuals from whom it's comprised is through digital channels, some of which weren't used or weren't designed to be used in this way. You just think about what offices used to look like way back when. I have to admit, these photos predate me, so I don't have any personal experience with this, not to brag, but the offices that we work in have changed dramatically over the years in response to the technology that we use. There were no computers on any desks kind of back in the 70s. Then there were huge computers on every desk, kind of moving through into the 80s. And now, obviously our computers have changed a lot, and the offices that we work in have had to adapt to that changing technology as well. The same thing applies to the next iteration of the workplace as well, the digital workplace. We can't just switch to a completely different model of working and expect the same solutions to be as effective. It just won't work. There has to be some kind of evolution and change. Now, it's tough to talk about modern intranets without discussing mobile. And since the popularization of smartphones, our personal relationship with technology has changed dramatically as well. All day, every day, we carry around powerful devices with unlimited potential in our pockets. And the experience of using these devices is getting better and better and better every day. Huge investments by suppliers in the hardware and software of these devices place them at the bleeding edge of change. And this change can be quickly distributed across the globe to millions of people in an instant. We've effectively been spoiled by our experience with these kind of devices, this technology over the last 10 or 15 years. And now we expect the best from every interaction we have with a piece of software. Now, needless to say, not all software companies have the resources of Apple and Google to plow into their products. So often there's a lag behind these developments with kind of other software developers. Now, that isn't to say that we can't learn lessons from them or even integrate their improvements into our own solutions. And we'll speak more about that in a second. So the first kind of trend that I want to explore in terms of what's coming next with the intranet is around integrations. Now, with the increased number of tools that we've already spoken about being used by businesses, you might think that kind of puts the intranet industry in jeopardy. Historically, providers competed on features and have a long list of them to attract new customers and appease those already on board. But if these customers have dedicated solutions that can better solve the challenges in front of them, do they need all of these features or an intranet at all? Kind of depends what you mean by an intranet, I suppose, what the role of these type of solutions are within your organization. one feather in the cap of intranet providers when compared to having dedicated solutions for every business challenge tends to be price. Having a specific piece of software for everything is expensive, right? You have to pay for every piece of software that you use generally, unless it's a free tool. Now, especially when you think about the SaaS model or software as a service that's adopted by a lot of companies these days, the upfront cost of adopting the software is not necessarily prohibitive, but the monthly costs can add up over time, especially if your organization is growing. The more users you get, the more expensive the software becomes. Not for everyone, though, not from Intranet Connections. Anyway, because of this, kind of providing a variety of features is still likely to be important for Intranet providers to kind of fill the gaps in between the specific pieces of software that an organization adopts to fulfill these specific needs. But there is an opportunity to take advantage of the functionality of other pieces of software through integrations. Now, simply put, integrations in the context of software are when two pieces of technology are connected together and perform a specific task. Integration can mean a lot of different things, right? One program being able to start another is a fairly shallow integration. Whereas if they're able to understand the data kind of created by each other, manipulate it, and then exchange it between them in a meaningful way, then that's obviously more complex. And better still, if you can't even tell that they're two separate programs, they act and appear as if they're one entity, it's a lot more complex, right? Integrations have become more and more important over recent years as they enable an organization to combine the tools that they're paying for and expand the functionality and maximize efficiency. What's that all saying about being more than the sum of the parts, right? The kind of software together is more effective and more efficient usually. Now, in my own daily routine, I use Office 365, Salesforce, Miro, HubSpot, Jira, Jazz HR, Hummy, and of course, our own intranet software. Now, at the moment, I have to jump a lot between these systems, not all of them, but some of them, and copy and paste data between them, log in and log out. That all takes time. It all reduces my productivity. If I could just go to one place and access everything, it would be a whole lot easier and a whole lot quicker to get what I need to do done. Now, last week, we released an integration between our intranet and our push communications tool. The tool itself integrates with Microsoft Teams and Slack, as well as utilizing email and SMS messages. Now, the integration between our intranet and the push communications tool means that communicators can distribute content from their intranet using these other communication channels. And the end users can choose how they receive these communications. So we could have developed our own kind of chat function. We actually do have a chat function in our intranet, but realistically, it's not going to overtake these market-leading pieces of technology that had huge investment behind them. Slack and Microsoft Teams are the kind of chosen corporate instant messenger for over 20 million people worldwide. Expecting our intranet software to kind of replace that would maybe be naive. Utilizing these market-leading products to improve our own software, however, makes a lot more sense, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper and easier for us to do. Now, when we're talking about integrations, we're really keen to know what integrations mean to you and the software that you use internally. So we're going to run a quick poll now to try and find that out. So what we want to know is what types of software you use, and which types of software you'd like to see integrated with an intranet. Now, we only have 10 options to choose from on the kind of Zoom quick polls. So we're not going to be able to include every single type of technology in there, but we do have some examples to kind of help guide you. So we're really keen to understand if you use any of these types of software on a day-to-day basis within your organization. And maybe the examples aren't specifically the ones that you use, but you know, a general idea or a general theme would be really interested to hear about. And if there's something that you use regularly in your kind of daily activities that's not on this list, then please do let us know what they are in the chat as well. We're really interested to hear about the specific tools that you use. And also, what those integrations look like. If you're already using software that's integrated with your intranet or integrated with some of the other tools that you use, let us know what they are in the chat. What programs are you combining together? What do they look like? How deep is the integration? Is it a very kind of shallow surface level one, like simply kind of starting another program or just reading the data? Or are they more complex? Are you able to kind of control and manipulate data between the two programs? Any insight that you can provide, it's really interesting for us. We're always kind of keen to hear that. We've how many responses have we got on the poll now? Only 10 responses so far, so please do kind of share your insight. Oh, we're up to 12. That's good. We will share the results, of course. It looks like chat seems to be one of the more popular kind of tools that you guys are using, but there's not necessarily a desire to kind of integrate them with an intranet. So that's quite interesting to hear. We'll just give you a couple more minutes to kind of contribute to that poll before we share the results. Have a quick drink while I wait. Okay, maybe we'll end it there and take a quick look at the results. So what are we seeing there, Rob? Do you want to give us a quick overview?
Yeah, for sure. So what we're seeing is what's being used a lot is obviously chat tools, Teams and Slack, and your document suites like Office 365, Google, and those kinds of things, and file hosting and sharing. Those are the three leaders that are used daily by our audience. And then I would say on the bottom, interestingly enough, people want those to be more integrated in intranet. So I don't think that's too surprising, but there's also some other you can see the diversity of the answers that people actually integrate a lot of different tools, right, to make it more streamlined.
Awesome. Thanks, Rob. Yeah. Basically, everybody wants everything integrated immediately. That's the gist that I'm getting from that. Good to know. We've got our work cut out for us. But yeah, if you are currently using integrations with your software suite within your organizations at the moment, please do let us know. We encourage you to kind of share those in the chat because, we're interested. We're nerdy, so we want to know. So yeah, please do post those in the chat. Now, moving on, the kind of next theme that we want to explore is around personalization or the personalized experience. Oh, I see Sandra raised her hand. Sandra, did you want to ask us something? I don't know if you're able to.
I can read the question here if you like.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So Sandra is asking, what software do you use for your intranet and what software do you use for the push notifications?
Cool. Good to know. Do you want to take that one, Rob? You're probably more of a tech head than I am.
Well, we specifically use our own. Obviously, we use our own intranet and use the push communications quite frequently across different channels. We have some developers like Slack. We have some people that use Teams a lot. More urgent communications, we use SMS. Things like 365 outage, you can't communicate on some of those other channels. So, different types of scenarios, we come up with some channel strategy. There's another anonymous question. Regardless of emerging technology, we've always had difficulty with getting buy-in from employees to use and champion our intranets through the years. What sort of strategies or approaches would you recommend to be able to engage with employees and have them utilize the intranet? I don't know if you want to take that, Alfie.
Yeah, that's a good. How long have you got? That's a good question. I think one of the main things to consider around engagement is use cases, right? We spoke earlier about problems and solutions. Understanding the problems of different teams within your organization, I think, is crucial to being able to ensure that the solution is kind of matching up with the problem. A lot of the time, organizations set up their intranet, they kind of add a few pieces of content, some forms, whatever it might be, and then just leave the organization or the other people in the organization to kind of start using it. And people need a bit of help, like an understanding deeply the issues and the kind of pain points that different teams in your organization having helps you to advise and guide them on which tools on your intranet could provide them with value. My biggest piece of advice is talk to people, get out there within your organization, speak to the managers and the end users of these teams who are the biggest consumers of your intranet. If you understand what their challenges are properly and kind of fully, then you can say, hey, look, we have this particular feature on the intranet that might help with that. The other thing that I think is really important is keeping a strategic focus around your intranet. Understanding the direction of your organization, what's important, what's a priority for your organization, will help you to determine how the intranet can help you fulfill those objectives and those needs. And it really helps if you have senior buy-in for that as well. And they can say, you know what, this is the direction that we're heading in, and this tool is very important. Active and visible leadership is really, really important when kind of seeking to get engagement and adoption. I think it was an anonymous question, but if you have any more questions or you'd like to have more of a discussion about that moving forward, we're happy to kind of talk offline as well if you want to keep the conversation going. Anyway, we'll move on. So that kind of leads quite nicely into the next theme that we want to explore, which is around personalized experience. Now, technology experiences these days are highly personalized, right? And think about all of the notifications that you get from the plethora of apps downloaded on your phone or the phone itself and how you're interacting with it. And here's Hulk Hogan next to his customized, personalized card to kind of illustrate the point. Now, my friend had a warning on his phone the other day based on his headphone usage exceeding the recommended amount over the previous 7 days. Highly personalized alert, really specific to his activity. So just quite interesting how now your phone is kind of trying to parent you as well, to get you to turn that headphones down, stop watching the TV, you'll get square eyes. Anyway, we want to be in control of how we use and interact with software now. So allowing people to personalize their own experience to an extent has been available for a while, but where does that lead? And which aspects of their experience do they want to personalize most? Rob briefly touched on the kind of the push communications tool that we have integrated with our intranet recently. One of the key driving factors behind that is the ability to personalize the user's experience. They can choose how they receive communications, whether it's through Teams or through email or through SMS or through Slack. The likelihood is if they're getting messages in a way that they've asked for, they're more likely to engage with them. Personalization is about tailoring the user experience to meet the needs of each individual, placing the power in the hands of the user to choose their own adventure and configure the intranet or any tool that they use how they see fit. Just like each individual's experience of the physical workplace, there are some things that are consistent for everybody, but there are some things that change depending on your role, your location, your activities, and so on and so forth. Now, the overall structure and organization of content will be consistent, as well as the branding and the content itself. One of the key roles that we see an intranet providing is acting as that single source of truth. So ensuring the information that employees can access is consistent is essential as far as we're concerned, regardless of the level of customization on offer. Now, which information is most relevant to them, though, will be different, right? Depending on their role, depending on what they do, depending on who they are. So enabling them to quickly and easily access the stuff that matters to them will help to improve the user experience, increasing engagement levels with the intranet and overall productivity. And this can be achieved in a few different ways. Now, subscriptions are something that we see frequently in a lot of tools these days, right? Allowing users to sign up for content that they're interested in. And if somebody posts something that kind of matches that subscription, they'll be sent some kind of notification or alert. Another way is around audience targeting, which is similar, but kind of in reverse, right? The publisher determines which audience groups this content is relevant for and will target those people specifically with messages, or just determine where the content lives, so it's more likely to be seen by those people. And then personal areas and feeds kind of bring these two things together. Having a space dedicated for each individual in which their stuff is highlighted helps to kind of bring these two things together. Somewhere for you to view your subscription content, your subscribed content, the targeted content that's been highlighted for you, bookmarks, favorites, kind of the comments and replies that you've been making. This all kind of gives the user one place to go to get up to speed quite quickly. Now, these types of personalizations are fairly commonplace these days, with many intranet platforms, including ours, offering them. But in all honesty, they're not really sophisticated, right? It's just a kind of, sign me up to this stuff and kind of send me everything that matches what I've requested. The next level of personalized experience would be if your intranet knew who you were, how you worked, knew and understood what your priorities were, and then provided you with relevant information based on these things. Now, we all have fairly personalized experiences on our personal devices, but what about in our work lives? In the tools that you use on a day-to-day basis, what type of personalized experiences do you have? Do you like them? Do they kind of annoy you getting all this kind of personalized, crafted content? Would you like more control over what you receive? Would you like less control? We want to know. Let us know in the chat. We're really keen to kind of hear your thoughts and your experiences in your roles on a day-to-day basis. Now, when you start considering the type of functionality that I mentioned, where it's about intelligent software, understanding what you do and who you are, that kind of ventures into the realms of artificial intelligence and machine learning, which I am absolutely not qualified to speak about at any great length, but we will cover briefly kind of shortly. Mobile is the next theme that we really want to explore, and it's very difficult to kind of have a conversation about what's coming next without speaking about mobile and the kind of remote experience. It almost seems redundant to talk about this technology because it's so prevalent in our daily lives. It's so ingrained. It's sometimes tough to think about what it was before we had this type of technology. The speed at which it was adopted is really quite staggering. And in lots of cases, it's leapfrogged older technology like landlines, for example, in some parts of the world. Any technology that predates this shift to mobile has had to find ways to accommodate it, or it runs the risk of being left behind. Now, touching on what I was talking about earlier around expectations changing from users, the almost flawless experience of mobile these days, and the apps that you use on a daily basis, which were designed from a mobile first perspective, have set the bar. However, replicating a desktop experience on a mobile in a system that was not designed with a mobile first approach will inevitably be tricky, right? There'll be lots of things that you have to consider, things that were designed from a completely different experience in mind that have to be overcome. Now, overall, these days, mobile phones are the most popular devices when it comes to internet traffic. And I quite like this graph because it shows the kind of trend over time and then that kind of plateauing that we've seen maybe over recent years. Mobile phones are the most popular device to access the internet through these days, and they comprise just under 60% of total website visits. But despite this, for desk-based employees, the choice between doing something on your PC versus your mobile seems like an obvious choice, at least it does to me anyway, at least while you're sat at your desk. Why would you want to kind of tap away at a phone when you have a bigger screen, you have a keyboard, you have a mouse to kind of play around with? The screen on my phone is broken as well, so that doesn't help when I'm trying to use it. But how many employees actually spend the majority of their time at the desks? I imagine a lot of the people on this call do. But actually, when I was carrying out some research for this presentation, I was surprised to learn that according to a report published by Emergence Capital, 80% of the global workforce are in fact deskless. With the top kind of 8 industries being agriculture, education, healthcare, retail, hospitality, manufacturing, transportation, and construction, which I found quite staggering. But when you think about the size of those industries and the kind of impact that they have on society, kind of makes sense, you know, like there's a lot of people on a building site. There are a lot of people working in manufacturing plants and agriculture compared to people working in an office or a home office these days. Apparently, there are 2.7 billion employees in these kind of 8 top industries, which is kind of crazy. Now, pre-mobile, the opportunities to increase efficiencies within these industries were limited. So naturally, investment in them was as well. Even now, despite the huge numbers that I've just spoken about, only 1% of software venture funding is directed towards deskless solutions. This surely has to change. And based on the trend of kind of niche industry-specific software solutions that we see organizations seeking out now, that's likely to be where a lot of growth is focused. But the mobile friendliness of the intranet, kind of generalist intranet, is likely to become more and more important as well for business as they seek to plug the gap between the systems that serve their underserved deskless employees. Now, I want to talk a little bit about an example. Although the cost of mobile devices is always falling, and we're all equipped with them every minute of every day, access and usage in some organizations is still a challenge. So we, as Rob mentioned at the start of the presentation, we have a lot of customers in the healthcare industry whose employees are deskless. But for a lot of them, the concerns around personal device use at work, both from an optics perspective, so they don't want patients to see their staff sat there kind of playing on their phones, and from a unionized perspective as well. They have a lot of unionized employees, and asking their employees to use a device that belongs to them and is personally funded has some issues with the unions. So the kind of concerns around productivity and maintaining an informed workforce are trumped by, they trump the productivity and the benefits that you could potentially gain from using mobile devices. So it's not just about the availability of the technology, it's also about organizational policy that dictates the use of mobile and also attitudes around it. So there are still some things that need to change before mobile technology can be adopted in a lot of industries as well. It's not just that this technology exists. Again, really interested to hear if you have any challenges of adopting mobile technology in your industry or your organization. Please do let us know in the chat. So what does this mean? Where do these kind of these trends intersect, and what does that mean for the kind of intranet industry? Going back to what I mentioned at the start of the presentation, technology changes, but the driving factors behind its use doesn't. Organizations will always seek to become more efficient, to do more things, offer new services and products, and grow. So thinking about how the trends that we've spoken about will manifest based on these drivers should give us a clue as to where the internet industry will go. Now, close your eyes and imagine for a second that every piece of software your organization uses, every piece of data it has, was connected and accessible through a series of integrations. When you add a tool, you simply plug it into this theoretical software panacea, and it instantly works with everything else. Every piece of business information you need is at your fingertips in one place. And the same applies to everybody in your organization. No more kind of chasing people down, emailing people to be sent information. You can access everything that you need. It doesn't matter where you're physically working or where you're located or what you're doing or on what device that you're using. Access to this information is global. It's easy to do. The outputs and the work that you do and the information that you input into the system is accessible in real time by everybody in your organization, and you can access the output of others in the same way. Based on the data the system has about you, like job role, experience, location, line manager, age, whatever it might be, right? And based on the things that it has learned from you, from the way that you interact with it, like your personal interests, when you're using the system, who you work with quite closely, the relationships that you have, which content you access frequently, the frequent tasks you're doing on a weekly basis. Your experience with the system is completely unique. You're provided with the information that you want to know and the information that you ought to know at the time that will likely benefit you most or will benefit your organization the most. It will know where your friction points are, what requires the most effort on your part during your day, and will make recommendations based on that. We've already started to see that in some piece of software. I get notifications from Microsoft saying, hey, look, this is the work you've done this week. These are your most efficient periods of time, you know. Now, that might sound amazing to some of you and terrifying to others. And it's quite an extreme example, but maybe that's where the role of the intranet will go in the future. It's more of a central connector rather than a content management system. It's about bringing other pieces of technology together and making the experience with them much more easy, more efficient, and more enjoyable for the end user. Now, progress in all three of these areas is likely to be made, and how they're prioritized could be impacted by a huge number of things. But the needs of the consumer is likely to be a big factor in what gets prioritized. So with that in mind, we have another poll for you, because we really want to know what you think about these things, because it helps us to determine what direction we go. So we'll run another poll now. And what we want to know in this poll is, which of the three themes we've explored in this presentation would you like to see intranets progress most with in the next few years? And maybe it's something else as well. You know, maybe it's not one of the things that we've spoken about. Maybe there's something else that you'd really like to see, or a different area that you'd like to see intranets progress in. So if that's the case, let us know in the chat. Sound like a broken record, but we really want to know what you think. So post in the chat if there's a fourth or fifth or sixth, or, you know, any number of different ways you'd like to see intranets improve moving forward. We're really keen to understand what your thoughts are on it. We'll just give people a few minutes to kind of share their thoughts in this final poll. Obviously, it's only a small kind of sample group, but still really interested to get your thoughts. So please do let us know. It's only a couple of clicks. We'll just give people a few more seconds to complete the poll, and then we'll take a look at the results. Interesting. Okay. Rob, do you want to share the results with everybody?
Absolutely. There we go. So we had about half of people add some answers here, and majority, it's distributed, but the majority is around integrations. So creating more synergies with our softwares to get jobs done and that sort of thing seems to be the majority. And then obviously some of that frightening personalized AI experience maybe you're describing, people actually kind of like that. Maybe it makes their work life easier and you know, more self-organized and managed in a way, and kind of led by the tools. So interesting. Remote was the weaker one.
Yeah. Okay.
We had something else.
Yeah. Well, that's good, I guess. Although maybe, you know, need a bit more thinking time to kind of come up with this. Basically, everybody wants a personalized butler on their intranet to give them everything they need. Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for your kind of contributions, everyone. It's really great to kind of get those from you. Now, I'd like to open it up for questions. Now, I know we had a couple of questions earlier on in the presentation, and it looks like there's been some chat going on. I've not been reading it myself, but this is your opportunity to kind of ask us maybe not anything, but ask us any questions that you might have. So we'll open up the floor. Does anyone have anything they want to ask?
While those are coming in, Alfie, one of the things in the chat was around how to get people off just the home page and actually into the intranet areas that, you know, of value outside of just the home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can touch on that. So one of the exercises that we encourage people to go through in the onboarding process is a card sorting exercise. And what that is, for those that don't know, is I'm going to talk about pre-COVID, because I did one when I launched an intranet in an organization I used to work in. You get people in a room from across your organization, you get them to, or you ask them questions about what information they need to do their job. Not what do you want your intranet to do or how do you want your intranet to look. Focus it around information, what they need to be successful in their roles. You get them to write down the different things they need on a post-it note or a number of post-it notes, stick them up on a wall. And you can do this on kind of software solutions as well, like Miro. And then once everyone's kind of put all their ideas up, you organize them into different buckets and different groups. And that helps you to determine the structure of your intranet, the different buckets of content that you might want to see. Now, once you have an understanding of what information is important to your employees, and you can run this exercise a number of different times and start to see themes, right? What pieces of content are most popular and most important to people, surfacing that content and making it easily accessible from the homepage really makes it easy for people to get to it. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that people are going to be diving through your intranet and accessing all these kind of pages across the whole site. And that's not necessarily important. As long as they're getting to the information that they need, it's kind of irrelevant how they get to it, as long as it's a very painless and quick process. So I think understanding what's most important to your users should help inform what you're putting on your homepage or that kind of next step below the homepage, and just directing them to it is probably the most important thing. Don't get too concerned around, hey, look, I don't have people diving deep into my intranet structure and looking at these pages. As long as they can find what they need, that's the most important thing. And that kind of exercise that I mentioned is one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is looking at the stats that you have behind your intranet. One of the things that I really like to look at, one of the stats, is the missed search stat, because it shows what people are searching for in your intranet and what they're unable to find. So using that insight to inform what you're including on your homepage, the quick links that you've got, or that top level navigation, can help people to navigate around your site easier, get to the content that they need quickly. I hope that kind of answered your question. Maybe it didn't, but if you have any follow-up questions, please do let us know.
Thanks, Elfie. That's great. I haven't seen any other question come in yet.
Okay.
So I'll just kind of wait here a little bit. There's some comment here around mobile and SMS from Shannon just now. You know, some organizations don't sanction or support maybe personal mobile devices being used for work, or but you know, in certain circumstances, being able to communicate over SMS is great, but not in terms of necessarily accessing intranet maybe. So I don't know if you want to touch on some of the channel strategy or different things there and how that might drive certain use cases, but that's it for questions so far.
Yeah, okay. I can talk about that briefly, and that actually kind of relates to the previous point as well. So one of the reasons that we developed our push communications tool, which I see Shannon and Marion kind of talking about in the chat, was to increase traffic to your intranet and helping people to get to the content that you need them and want them to access. Now, the reason why we call it the push tool is because you have your intranet, which is your pull tool. You upload content, you put stuff on there, and people naturally gravitate towards it because it's useful information. But sometimes they need a bit of encouragement. You can't rely on them to just go there by themselves. So having the push tool that complements it helps to push people towards your intranet, towards the content that you want to see. So if there's a page that you need people to see, or a particular piece of content that's really important to them, you can use the various channels that you have at your disposal: email, SMS, Slack, Microsoft Teams at the moment. Those are the 4 that we have in the push tool, to direct people to that content. So instead of just relying on them to go to your intranet, find their own way to it, you can reach out to them in a way that they have said, hey, look, I want to be contacted in this way. Choose this channel to communicate with me. And that inevitably helps them to get to where you need them to get to. Now, as a communicator, you do have some control over how you message people, so you can listen to their preferences, or on some occasions you might want to just spread the message across all of the channels, or even just a specific channel. And you have the power to do that through the kind of channel strategies on the tool as well. And if you're interested in learning more about the push communications tool and the integration that we recently launched, we did another webinar last week, same time last week, about our latest release, 15.5, which incorporates that kind of push communications integration. And you can find a link to the recording of that webinar on our website as well. It will be in the same place that we share the link to for this webinar recording. So check it out if you didn't get a chance to attend that one as well.
That's great, Alfie. Thanks for that added color. Before we get to the hour here, there's one question that came in from Jessica, which is a great question. It's really around analytics. If we do a future webinar, maybe around how to use analytics for intranet success. That's another really important theme and topic that's evolving in the internet space, and some gaps in our industry in terms of how to do good analysis on what's delivering value in the internet. So could that be a webinar of the future?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be quite a fun one as well. I think one of the, and I know we've only got a minute or so left, so I'll be quick, but one of the most important things about data and analysis is using it to influence what you do next. I think often people kind of look at data and they're like, oh, cool, that's interesting. And then that's it. You know, there's no follow-up. There's no, oh, well, let's take our learnings and use that to influence our strategy. And that's the crucial thing for me, where a lot of people miss out on.
Excellent. That's perfect. So short answer, yes, is what I heard.
We will do another webinar about analytics. Thank you. I think it was Jessica you said.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, maybe we should leave it there for today then. Thank you very much for attending, everybody. It was great to have you. It looks like we had quite a few people hang around to the end as well. So that's always good to see. We'll see you on the next one. And like we said, we'll be sharing the recording with the session as well. If you want to share it internally, or if there are others in your organization that couldn't make it, they will be sent a link if they registered for the session as well. Thanks very much, everyone. See ya.